Welcome to Just a Minute. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and once again it is my pleasure, as the Minute Waltz fades away, to welcome our many listeners throughout the world, and also the four dynamic, diverse, and daring players of the game who are going to compete this week. We welcome back three long-time players of the game, that is Paul Merton, Peter Jones and Clement Freud, and someone who's not played it quite so often, that is Stephen Fry. Would you please welcome all four of them? And, as usual, I am going to ask them to speak on a subject that I give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from that subject. Beside me sits Jane Gibson, who's going to help me keep the score, and she'll blow a whistle when 60 seconds are up. And this particular edition of Just a Minute is coming from the Radio Theatre in the heart of Broadcasting House, not very far from the centre of the great metropolis of London. So let's start the show today with Stephen Fry, and who better? Stephen, the novel Inside Me. Talk on the subject if you can, starting now.
Well, the novel Inside Me, oddly enough, is David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, which I ate by mistake only yesterday. I erred in thinking it was too...
And you've been challenged already by Clement Freud.
For erring.
So I didn't hear that, Clement.
He hesitated.
I don't think you hesitated
I thought
enough.
you said I erred.
And that is a hesitation.
What?
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
What was it that you heard?
What a clever idea, Clement Freud. A brilliant challenge. But he erred, but he didn't actually say err. Actually, I consider it an incorrect challenge, so, Stephen, you have a point for an incorrect challenge. Stephen, I wish you to go on this subject because you still have 51 seconds available. The novel Inside Me, starting now.
The novel Inside Me was written by Dame Sesame Halver in 1942. Inside Me was the title she used because it was actually a kind of survey of the life that goes on within the human body of an ageing female novelist. It's not a good read.
Paul challenged.
Novelist?
It's like saying Montgomery and Coventry.
Paul, you have a correct challenge. A point for that, of course. 37 seconds are available. The novel Inside Me, starting now.
It was once said by somebody, Julian Critchley, I think, that everybody has at least one good novel in them, apart from Geoffrey Archer. And he was referring, of course, to the fact that the esteemed gentleman has written many books, which...
Stephen
Name
Fry.
one person who esteems Geoffrey Archer.
Geoffrey Archer.
Ah, damn it. You've done it.
Paul, another point to you with the 23 seconds. The novel Inside Me, starting now.
I'm going to write the great novel one day when I'm old enough.
Clement Freud challenged.
Repetition of great.
Yes, you did mention the word great before, Paul. So that is repetition. Why are you so surprised?
Because I think they, like me, know that it was actually the word good he said before. One person has at least one good novel inside them.
I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to you, Paul, and say you still have the subject. 19 seconds available. The novel Inside Me, starting now.
I'll have to be a wonderful age before I put pen to paper. I would have had to experience life to the full before I would even dare to submit...
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of before.
Before, that was definitely a repetition. Right.
I said before.
I know, yeah. Clement, you at last got in. 10 seconds are available. The novel Inside Me, starting now.
I've just come back from a Greek island where I spent 3 weeks finishing my novel. I'm a very slow reader.
No, Stephen challenged just before the whistle.
He's a very slow talker as well.
Yes. Well, actually, he was waiting for the laugh, which didn't exactly come. Half a second on the subject of the novel Inside Me, starting now.
The novel Inside Me is...
Whoever is speaking as the whistle goes gains an extra point, and on this occasion it was Stephen Fry, so he has taken a strong lead at the end of that round. Peter, will you take the next round? The subject is wearing my other hat. Can you tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now?
Well, my other hat is a Norfolk tweed, hat with a very round crown, and it's a lovely-looking hat. And when I put it on, I feel the need to stride across the downs or the Broads or wherever I am. Well, not in the water, of course. And I like to feel the wind blowing through. There's a little hole. And the wind, it dries one's hair and everything, and it's a terrific headpiece. And I look forward to wearing it very soon. Again.
Paul Merton, you challenge.
A natural conclusion.
Paul, you had a correct challenge. You have 13 seconds on wearing my other hat starting now.
I would be wearing my other hat, but I recently lent it to Peter Jones. And when I phoned him up and asked for it back, he said, I'm awfully sorry, there's a hole right in the middle of it. In fact, it had been ruined by him. It's the last time that I lend such an item to this particular...
Paul Merton speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point, and he's gone into the lead now ahead of Stephen Fry. But Clement, it's your turn to begin. The subject is loudspeakers. Will you tell us something about loudspeakers in just a minute, starting now?
I think the loudest speaker that I ever came across in my political life was Ian Paisley. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland is a liar. At which the person in the chair would say order and repeat that word, which I can't do, because basically what happens in...
Paul, you challenge first. Hesitation. 37 seconds available. Loudspeakers starting now.
Loudspeakers, of course, an integral part of any hi-fi system. I have a particularly fine pair of loudspeakers at home. I've got very interested in music over the last few years because a very good musical web...
Stephen, you got in first then, yes. We call that hesitation. 24 seconds. Loudspeakers with you starting now.
Are very annoying indeed and can bend the needle of a...
Paul Merton challenge.
Pardon?
Paul, we'll give you a bonus point because we enjoyed the interruption, but it wasn't a challenge within the rules of just a minute. So, Stephen, for being interrupted, you get another point. You have 20 seconds available still. Loudspeakers starting now.
Hardly know enough on the subject to discourse for such a length, but nonetheless, leak is a make of loudspeaker, as is BO-vision or BO... Oh, dear, oh, dear.
Clement, you challenge.
Repetition.
Yes, right. Do you want to say what it was?
No.
Oh, right. 13 seconds. Loudspeakers with you, Clement, starting now.
It's very odd that Arthur Scargill, Derek Hatton, the more left-wing the person is, the more loudly does he or she...
Paul, you challenge.
2 more.
2 more, there were indeed. 5 seconds are still available on loudspeakers. It's with you, Paul, starting now.
I want to make this point very clear to everybody here today. I want to say to you that undoubtedly...
So Paul Merton got points in the round as well as one for speaking as the whistle went, and he's gone into the lead alongside Stephen Fry. And Stephen Fry, it's your turn to begin. The subject is lottery. Tell us something about the lottery starting now.
Oh, lottery. I've never bought a lottery ticket. I suppose I should have done, but...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition.
What?
Lottery.
I know. It was repeated. Peter, I know you've only been playing the game for 34 years. But you are actually allowed to repeat the subject which is on the card.
But I am improving.
I know. So I got to give you a bonus point because you interrupted and came out with a delightful remark.
Yes.
A bonus point for that. In fact, it's the first one you got today, actually. But your contribution is invaluable. Keep it up.
Right.
Well done. Lottery is on the card. And 56 seconds with you, Stephen. Lottery starting now.
I think it was Cecil Rhodes who said to have been born English is to have drawn first prize in the lottery of life. Many people would disagree, particularly the Scots, Welsh and Irish, no doubt. However, as I was saying earlier, I've never actually bought a lottery voucher or token or other word that I can't repeat. If I were to do so, no doubt I might then put myself in the frame for winning a fair old slice of cash because huge amounts of money are offered as prizes for those who do go to a shop and in exchange for simoleons purchase such a...
I'm lost here.
I know.
In exchange for simoleons.
Simoleons, yes.
What's that? Money. It's an unusual word for money. I grant you. I said most of the others, or at least couldn't think of any more. Missoula, I should have said probably.
Missoula, yeah. I don't think simoleons is sufficiently, especially we're going to get letters from India.
Yeah, we should cater for the general ignorance of the British. That's the way the BBC's going, isn't it? Let's just assume everybody's stupid and just have words of two syllables and no more, because the great British public are all idiots, aren't they? They're all idiots, apparently.
Fry, do contain yourself, please.
Sorry, I just get very angry at this dumbing down. It's just relentless and remorseless. Now it's hit this great intellectual showcase.
So, Paul, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and say you've got 26 seconds. Tell us something about lottery starting now.
Like Stephen, I've never actually bought a lottery ticket. The thing doesn't appeal to me, but...
The Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation?
Yes, hesitation, Clement. 21 seconds, lottery with you starting now.
I think
Hesitation.
Hesitation, Paul, yes, it was, yes. 18 seconds, lottery starting now.
I remember being in this opium den just outside Walthamstow when I realised that the man at my elbow was going to throw the dice onto the floor. I thought, is he going to put all his money on this last throw? Is he...
Clement, what's your challenge, Clement?
Throw.
Clement, you have a correct challenge. 4 seconds, lottery starting now.
It's not any money that you get for winning. There are lotteries where Anne Widdecombe...
So Clement Freud was then speaking as the whistle went, and it's Peter Jones' turn to begin. Peter, the subject I have here is timetables. Will you tell us something about them in just a minute, starting now?
They can be very interesting reading and quite stimulating if you're lying in the garden in a long chair and you have a drink in one hand and a timetable in the other. You can work out journeys, particularly if you're at the seaside, and you can plan how to get home quite soon, and you have to change crew usually.
Peter, sorry to interrupt you, but
actually, right?
Paul Merton has challenged you.
Oh, I didn't hear him.
I thought there was a very slight hesitation. No. I may be wrong.
There was. Did you bring all the audience in, Peter? Some of them. They're certainly on your side. The audience would like to hear from Peter more on timetables.
That's right, I was probably completely wrong.
You've got the benefit of the doubt on that one, Peter, and you keep timetables, having an incorrect challenge, of course, a point for that, and 36 seconds starting now.
I can change the venue to a ship on the sea. You're on a cruise, and you can work out what time the vessel will arrive in New York or Jamaica or somewhere else, if you like. But you are usually wrong, because the shipping companies don't adhere to any particular timetable or time. That's not the same word, is it? And,
I'd challenge yourself, Peter. And you've done exactly that, Peter. What's your challenge? Hesitation?
Yes.
Yes, I thought so. You did err a bit in there. So that's a correct challenge, Peter. Well listened. And you got in very cleverly, Peter, with a correct challenge, a point for that, of course, with 3 seconds to go on the subject.
Does he get a bonus point for his challenge?
Almost, yes. But gird your loins for another 3 seconds and go on the subject of timetables starting now.
And it stops at crew from 2 to 2, 2.
You could have challenged yourself again for crew, because you said that before. You repeated it.
Yes, I did.
You slipped up there. You missed out on that one.
Yes,
but anyway.
I thought they'd change the name somehow.
Right. Anyway, but you've done very. You got a lot of points in that round, and didn't want to speak as the whistle went. You're still in 4th place, but a very strong 4th place. And who begins the next round? It is Paul Merton. The the green-eyed monster. Tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now.
When I was growing up, I was convinced there was a green-eyed monster in my bedroom who would wander around the bed once I was asleep. I think he lived in the wardrobe, and I would open the door and try to see if he was hiding in the darker recesses of that particular piece of furniture, but could never quite catch him. I became certain that he was following me around during the day. Always 5 steps behind me, I would turn and he would disappear. How do I know that this monster had green eyes? Because all monsters have green eyes. That is where they come from, the land of the green-eyed monster. You can be walking through the dark streets of London.
Stephen Fry, you challenged.
Apart from being just absolutely scared out of my wits, he did repeat dark.
What was that?
Dark came twice.
It did come twice, yes. What a pity. I was really enthralled there.
No, I'm sorry.
Were you really?
I really was. I was fascinated. I must... you should tell these bedtime stories. Some of the other children find on their
Well, if
lives.
I ever see you round about bedtime, I will, Nicholas.
It's very unlikely to happen again.
You know what Paul and I do at bedtime. Right. 16 seconds. Yes, repetition there. Stephen, and it's the green-eyed monster with you. 16 seconds starting now.
Described as jealousy, of course, in Shakespeare's Othello, that feeds upon itself and mocks the meat that feeds it, or something similar to that. I can't quite remember the quotation, of course, but never mind. That's not in itself an offence, I hope. It's an awful thing, jealousy.
Paul challenged.
He couldn't remember the quotation, and that's an offence.
Well, he was deviating from a green-eyed monster and going on to not remembering quotation.
That's
so
right.
I would call that deviation.
That could have been me saying that, Nicholas.
What's that? I didn't hear.
Oh, by the way, you left your cocoa under the bed last night.
I'm sure you drank it, Paul.
No, I didn't. It had your teeth in it.
But where were we? There's 4 seconds available. It's the green-eyed monster, and it's with you, Paul, starting now.
Many years ago, I remember a particular incident when I was walking through a fun fair.
So Paul Merton speaking as the whistle went again. The extra point is still just in the lead ahead of Stephen Fry. And Stephen, it's your turn to begin. I think it is your turn. Let me check on this. Yes, it is. Oh, the subject, house mats. I don't know what Ian Mester's mind is thinking of here, but no, it isn't. I've misread it.
It's actually Copenhagen.
Yes. Stephen, your turn to begin. The subject is mouse mats.
You sure it's not mouse hats?
No, it's mouse mats, and it's a subject which has obviously got a huge response from the audience because they've roared with laughter. But would you take the subject and talk on it for 60 seconds if you can, starting now?
Well, of course, the term really derives from the Palo Alto Research Center in California, where the WIMPs environment was devised: windows, icons, mice, and pull-down menus for computers. The mouse is a pointing device used for the GUI, or graphic user interface, of the common personal ordinateur, as the French like to call these digital devices. The mouse mat itself can come nowadays in all kinds of beautifully illustrated forms and shapes. I have one, for example, which has a scene from Judy Garland's wonderful film The Wizard of Oz. Other people who are slightly less camp might have perhaps Arnold Schwarzenegger, people like that. You can have any number of scenes, any number of...
Paul challenge.
There was a repetition of people.
There was a repetition of people, yes. It is difficult to hear because for the first time, I must tell our audience, and I must explain to our listeners, normally they put their desks quite close so we can all hear. For some reason, they put them right at the further side of the stage, so it's difficult for them to hear.
This is going to make great radio.
I know. I realised after I'd started I was digging myself a hole that I was never going to get out of. But
And you left your hearing aid next to the mug of cocoa, unfortunately.
Right, Paul, you have a correct challenge, a repetition
and
of people.
you couldn't see too well when you were reading Mouse and House.
Is there a sensory organ left, Nicholas?
Well, is there?
Do you know where you are?
Indeed I do.
I had a theatrical landlady once who was 92.
Yeah.
And I said, my word, you're operating terribly well. She said, well, thank goodness I still have all my marbles up here, you know, and nothing really escapes me. I said, is that a fact? She said, oh, yes. Touch wood. come in.
Peter Jones, you can come in whenever you want to. And we give you a bonus point for that. And anybody want to top it, they get another bonus point. But it isn't. It was a repetition of people, and it's 25 seconds for you, Paul, on House Mouse. I've done it again. Mouse mats starting now.
I have several mice at home and I look after them very well. They tend to leave the house round about 11:30 in the evening and come back about past. I could have said any other time.
That's the way the mind goes on occasions. Stephen, you got in first on mouse mats, and 14 seconds available starting now.
The idea being, of course, that you simply drag your mouse across the surface of the mat, and it's this kind of fluency and fluidity to the motion which allows the pointing device aforementioned to register clearly on the screen. However, some mouse mats...
Clement Freud challenge.
We've had a screen.
You had a screen
did you?
before.
I'm sorry, I do.
Don't apologise.
No, I
It's
should
all
be
part
sorry,
of the
because
game.
it's not right. I should play it properly. I shouldn't repeat words. And if I do, I should apologise and say I'm sorry like a man.
If you apologise for the fact...
Close to it as I can get.
Clement, yes, a correct challenge, and you got in very cleverly with 1 second to go. That audience you had in the palm of your hand, you've suddenly lost them. But you have 1 second on mouse mat starting now.
If you can train a mouse to use a mat.
So, we've got an interesting situation, points-wise, because Clement got another point there. And they're very, very close. Only 1 point separates our three leaders, Clement, Freud, Paul, Merton and Stephen Fry, in that order. Peter Jones is just behind them. Paul, it's your turn to begin. And the subject, I'm going to get this one right, it's housekeeping.
You sure it's not mousekeeping?
No, it's not mousekeeping. They're not
It's not mousekeeping?
No. And we'll have to say, in my defence, that the subjects have not been typed onto the cards in front of me.
You've been reading handwriting?
Handwriting, yes. I've been reading
My
handwriting.
respect for you has gone through the roof.
I know. Housekeeping, Paul. 60 seconds, as usual, starting now.
I believe it was one of the Gabor sisters, Jar Ditto, who said, I am a wonderful housekeeper. Whenever I get divorced, I keep the house. This was a joke of hers, and of course, that's not exactly what we mean by the term of housekeeper. There are, particularly in this day and age...
Stephen Fry.
Does that count as hesitation? I don't know.
Yes, I would.
Really,
Yes. Let's hear from you on housekeeping, Stephen, starting... Oh, and the number of seconds? 39, starting now.
Mrs. Danvers, one of the great housekeepers, I think, from Daphne du Maurier's novel Rebecca. A chatelaine is a rather nice French word for a housekeeper. You picture the keys, don't you, on the apron? This proud woman haunting the corridors of the great house with marvellous sort of aprons and things like that. And I also picture sometimes great sort of linen presses, don't you? And I've said great twice.
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of great.
Yes, there were too many
I know,
greats there.
it's just feeble, isn't it? I'm so sorry.
Clement, 20 seconds. Tell us something about housekeeping, starting now.
Housekeeping is a word you very often find on telephones in hotels. There is waiting room service.
Stephen Fry challenge.
A bit of a hesitation there.
There wasn't a... Yes, Stephen, you got it back. 12
Sorry about
seconds.
that.
Housekeeping
starting now.
It's like stop between two words.
And Peter, you challenged.
No, I didn't.
Nurse, he's out of bed again.
Would you like Peter to just finish
Well,
his
I was
one?
challenging on Peter's behalf.
You were? Oh, right. You were challenging on Peter's behalf. They're all three equal, and they'd love to hear from you on housekeeping, Peter, with 11 seconds to go, starting now.
It's a very important thing to learn, because if you don't, things get rather sticky and unpleasant. And if you read the Sunday supplements, you realise...
Peter Jones speaking as a whistle when gained the extra point. He has leapt forward, but he is still training a little the other three. They are equal now in the lead, and this is going to be the last round because we have no more time. But Clement Freud, it's your turn to begin. The subject is counting sheep. Tell us something about that as we go into the last round. 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
Counting sheep is something people do in order to induce sleep. And depending on who they are, they count sheep in different ways. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 would be a method. But I, as a gastronome and cook, tend to count sheep by the constituent parts thereof. Right, left, high, low, buttock, rump, eye, genitalia.
Paul Merton
Well,
challenge.
this is deviation, surely. You go to sleep by counting sheep's buttocks, surely that's...
Well, I suppose you can go to sleep. I mean, it wouldn't put you to sleep, wouldn't put me to sleep, but I mean...
Well, I know that, Nicholas. Who better, indeed? If I don't, who does?
Oh, we're back to the cocoa again. Right, no, I mean, let's to be fair to Clement, I suppose you can use any method you like if it does induce sleep, and that's, according to him, is what induces sleep in him. So I think I have to give him the benefit of the doubt, Paul, and say he has 32 seconds counting sheep starting now.
Mutton is a very good thing to count.
Stephen Fry challenge.
You could drive a small flock of sheep in that pause, I felt.
I tell you need to rub it in.
Oh, sorry. I'm just trying to be apropos.
It was a pause, Stephen. You had the subject, 27 seconds, counting sheep starting now.
I could actually quote exactly what Peter Jones said at the last round. It's an important thing to do, otherwise things get sticky and unpleasant, as he said of housekeeping. So I count sheep in order to get sleep too, in order to prevent such an unpleasant...
And Peter Jones' challenge.
He's using my material.
That's the wicked thing about Just a Minute. You can use everybody's material as long as you don't repeat it in the round. So what is your challenge when the rules of Just a Minute?
Deviation.
Why? Because he was using your material?
Yes.
Right. Oh, I must be fair to Stephen on this occasion, but we did...
On this
a bonus
occasion,
point.
you're going to be... Right.
No, we give you a bonus point because we enjoyed the challenge, Peter. And Stephen has got 17 seconds, counting sheep, starting now.
Very difficult thing to do, of course, because they look so similar. It's very hard to carry on keeping the methods
Clement Freud
very,
challenge.
very, 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 very...
Your challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, there was a hesitation, yes.
I repeated very as well.
I know, but that was after you pressed his
I want that
buzzer.
to be taken into consideration when you send it.
I can't give him 2 points.
Oh.
1 point for 12 seconds available, counting sheep, Clement, starting now.
Counting sheep makes it essential to appreciate the colour of the animal in question: blue, green, yellow, red.
Stephen challenge.
I think I'll allow him to make a list once, but another list I think is just too naughty.
Clement, no, if he lists, it's not a sin within the rules of Just a Minute. So you weren't deviating, Clement, and you have 2 seconds to keep going on counting sheep, starting now.
Counting the sheep on the far side.
Clement Freud was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so. And I said earlier on, this is to be the last round. Let me just tell you the final situation. Peter Jones, who did magnificently as usual, he did just finish in 4th place. He wasn't far behind Paul Merton, and 3 points ahead of Paul. Equal in the lead were Clement Freud and Stephen Fry. So we say, this week, they are our winners. It only remains for me to say thank you to our 4 outstanding players of the game, Stephen Fry, Peter Jones, Paul Merton and Clement Freud. We thank them. We thank Jane Gibson for keeping the score, and also Ian Messiter, who created the game, keeps us in work, and our producer and director, Chris Neal. On behalf of them, and we thank our audience who've come in here to the Radio Theatre in London for joining us and egging us on our way. From them, from me, Nicholas Parsons. Tune in next time we play Just a Minute. Till then, from all of us, goodbye. Welcome to Just a Minute. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the Minute Waltz fades away, once more it is my pleasure to welcome our many listeners in many parts of the world, particularly, of course, in the British Isles, and also to welcome the 4 exciting and talented players who this week are going to join me for this game. We welcome back the irreplaceable Paul Merton, the irresistible Peter Jones, the irrepressible Clement Freud, and someone who hasn't played the game quite as often as those 3, and that is the irredeemable Greg Proops. Will you please welcome all 4 of them? And as usual, I am going to ask them to speak on a subject that I give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Beside me sits Jane Gibson. She's going to help me keep the score, and she will blow a whistle vehemently, we hope, when the 60 seconds are up. And this particular edition of Just a Minute is coming from the Pleasance of the Edinburgh Fringe of '99, and in front of us we have an enthusiastic, hyped-up Fringe audience to cheer us on our way as we begin the show this week with Greg Proops. Greg, the subject we have here, very apt, I think, for this time of year, the end of the century. Can you talk about the end of the century? 60 seconds starting now.
The end of the century will mark 100 years past. Here in Scotland, the Y2K problem is a very serious one, for it is the day that all the deep fryers will go code yellow. The city of Edinburgh will mark the end of the century in a various and splendid ways. For one thing, they will note that the century has passed. And at the same time...
Paul Merton, you challenged.
There was a hesitation.
There was a hesitation, yes, yes. So you get a point for that. You take over the subject, which is the end of the century. There are 28 seconds available, and your time starts now.
There is a great deal of controversy about when the actual end of the century is. Some people believe that the year 1999 marks the end of the century, where others people say, well, I don't...
And Clement Freud challenged.
Repetition of people.
Yes, there were too many people.
Was there?
Yes, and there's... So, Clement, a correct challenge, a point to you in 15 seconds. You tell us something about the end of the century starting now.
Rather as in snooker, I've never achieved a break. So have I never made a century at cricket. I've got into 70s, 80s, nearly 90. Through the slips, third man, boundary, a six.
This game, whoever is speaking when the whistle goes gains. An extra point on this occasion was Clement Freud, and for the other point in the round, he's naturally in the lead ahead of Paul Merton and Peter Jones. Your turn to begin. The subject, school days. Tell us something about school days in this game, starting now.
Oh, I had wonderful school days until I was sent to boarding school. But in the first 10 years of my life, I went to the grammar school in Wem, Shropshire. Lovely city, little town, I mean. And they had a huge playing field with a stream going through it from one end to the other. And there were sticklebacks and all kinds of river insects in it, where I used to enjoy catching, and we had a little ship which we put in at the one end and it went down to the other. And some of the masters were terribly interesting because they'd been in the Great War. This is, I'm talking about the... What's the matter?
It's very good, keep going. Oh, challenge.
Hesitation?
I was laughing so much, Peter.
People interrupted. I didn't have a fair whack at the whip.
I think everybody was so intrigued with the idea of you going to school with sticklebacks and things like that.
Well, interesting.
But, well, I mean, you didn't have a fair crack. You kept going for 46 seconds.
Yeah, I could have gone on longer.
Paul, do you mind? I know you can be generous in this game.
That's fine, yeah.
Because he maintains he was put off, and he did go for 44 seconds, so you have another 16 seconds. Tell us more about your school days, Peter, starting now.
The masters were awfully nice.
That's it, Paul.
Repetition of masters.
You said masters. But Peter Jones does get a point, for being interrupted last time, and Paul gets a point for a correct challenge. He has 14 seconds now to tell us something about school days starting now.
I remember my nursery school very well. During the break that we used to have around about lunchtime, the kids were encouraged to get on these little hobby horses, and I always got the one that had chipped blue paint. The others were quite brightly painted. There was reds and yellows.
So, Paul Merton, speaking as the whistle waned, gained that extra point as well as another one in the round, so he's now ahead of Clement Freud in that order. And Clement, it's your turn to begin. The subject is my most embarrassing purchase. Tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now.
I think the most embarrassing purchase I ever made was a season ticket to watch Plymouth Argyle play at Home Park. They are the most pathetic football team there's ever been. Finally, they realize their own incompetence, and now if they get a corner, they do a lap of honor. But having purchased this right to go to their home matches every Saturday, also in midweek.
Paul Merton challenge.
Well, the first team doesn't play home matches every Saturday. They play home, then away, and away, and home. Do you understand how this game works?
That was a clever challenge of deviation.
No.
Because, why not?
Because the season ticket allows you to see the second team who play...
We hadn't established that, though, had we, Nicholas?
He hadn't established it. No, he hadn't established it. So you give me an impossible dilemma. I'm going to antagonise one or the other, whichever decision I make.
Antagonise Clement.
Right. Paul was listening well. Has a correct challenge of deviation. 30 seconds, my most embarrassing purchase, Paul, starting now.
Well, undoubtedly, it was a flat that I bought at the height of the property boom in 1988, and if I lived for another 35 years, it might just about make up the equity that it had then. A lot of people got caught out by this. They purchased property that they thought at the time was...
Peter Jones challenge.
Repetition.
A what?
Purchased.
A purchase is on the one of the subjects.
Oh, is it?
Yes, I'm sorry. I know you've only been playing the game for 33 years, Peter, but you can repeat the subject or any one of the words if it's a phrase. My most embarrassing purchase.
Yes.
So what a pity.
It is really.
An incorrect challenge. So, Paul, another point to you in 15 seconds on my most embarrassing purchase, starting now.
Possibly another contender for the most embarrassing purchase I ever made was a jumper that I bought in 1976. It was a hideous...
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of 19.
Yes. So, Clement, you listen and you get back in again, and you have got the subject back again. Another point, of course, my most embarrassing purchase, and there are only 5 seconds to go, starting now.
The purchase I made at Timothy White, the chemist, was...
Paul challenge.
Deviation, it's Timothy White's.
Yeah, actually, you're right, it is.
The shop is called Timothy White.
Oh, there could have been an individual chemist in the country that... All right. I gave it against you last time. I give you the benefit of...
You were foolish last time.
I'll be foolish again, Clement, and give it to you.
Good.
And so you have the benefit of the doubt on this occasion, so we've got even justice there. You have another point, and you still have the subject, and you have 1 second. My most embarrassing purchase starting now.
I shan't talk about it.
So at the end of that round, Clement Freud and Paul Merton are equal in the lead. Paul, it's your turn to begin. The subject, the black sheep of the family. Can you tell us something about the black sheep of the family, the subject, that is, starting now?
Well, I suppose it's a phrase that means somebody doesn't quite fit in. The black sheep of my family is Uncle Rufus, who is currently doing 35 years for kidnapping milkmen all across the southeast of England. It was something that he specialised in doing. He would phone up United Dairies and he would say, "Your employee is now under my control. I have hypnotised him to kill the Prime Minister." And you would see these poor, unfortunate men walking around the town centre with hollow eyes, vacant expressions, wondering to themselves, "I must shoot Tony Blair." Reason why he got in trouble with the authorities, because the police came up to him and they said, "What do you think you're doing? You can't go round putting these people under the fluence, under the trance. Their families are so worried about them. These individual dairy workers that you have taken into your head to put into some kind of strange brain pattern where they don't know what they're doing and they want to mark..." Who challenged?
No. Greg Proops, you challenged with half a second to go.
Oh,
no. What is your challenge?
He said doing 3 times. Repetition.
Well, Greg, you are correct, but as he went for 59.5 seconds, anybody who can do... What you challenge? Peter?
Well, I challenge him for hesitation because he should have challenged after the second one.
I could say the same to you. You could have challenged after. What I'm going to do is, because if someone goes for the full 60 seconds, they get a bonus point for not being interrupted and one for speaking the whistle went. So we give 2 points to Paul Merton already, because that's what he almost achieved. And Greg, you had a correct challenge, so you have half a second, a point for a correct challenge, by the way. The black sheep of the family, half a second starting now. And you've been challenged.
Hesitation.
No, another point to Greg Proops. A quarter of a second. The black sheep of the family with you, Greg, starting now.
The black sheep of the...
And you will. Another point. Greg Proops again points in that round, including one for speaking the whistle went, and has leapt forward. And he's still in third place. But it's his turn to begin. So, Greg, the subject now is glad rags. Tell us something about that in 60 seconds, if you can, starting now.
Back in the 50s and early 60s, there was a baseball player named Leon Big Daddy Wagner. He was known for his sartorial splendor, not only on the field of play, but off as well, where he was, of course, decked out each day in an outfit that can only be described as pimpin' or mackin', if you will. And I don't think you will by your sullen, stubborn reaction to silence in the face of the word mackin'.
Yes, Peter, you challenge.
A repetition of mackin'.
Well, after I said it twice.
Yes.
It wouldn't be repetition if you said it once.
So, Peter, correct challenge. You have glad rags and you have 30 seconds starting now.
I haven't got very many glad rags because I'm not often glad. But I do have 1 or 2 things in the trunk upstairs which I put on when I'm trying to celebrate.
Clement Freud challenge.
He lives in a flat.
Peter says, what has that got to do with it, Clement? Because you could...
How can you have a trunk upstairs if you live in a flat?
Because there might be a storage space in the block of flats where he keeps his trunk.
No,
and
no.
I'm not always at the flat.
So, Peter...
We're seeing the ugly side now.
Not necessarily the ugly side, the glossy side, I think. Peter, an incorrect challenge. You have a point for that. 19 seconds to continue on glad rags, starting now.
And it's a satin dressing gown which was modelled on Noel Coward's original, which he was photographed in many times, about 1925, 6 and 7. 8 even, I don't know. But it was quite oriental.
Clement challenge with quarter of a second to go. What was your challenge?
Hesitation.
Oh, I have another impossible decision to make here. I'm going to assume that the whistle was blown quarter of a second late, so the... And so, actually, Peter was, technically speaking, when the... So Clement endorses my decision, and Peter, technically you were speaking as the whistle went, so you get an extra point for doing so. And what is the situation at the end of that round? So Peter has leapt forward. He's now equal with Greg Proops in third place, behind Clement Freud and Paul Merton in that order. And Paul, you begin the next round. The subject, the Glitterati. Tell us something about them in this game, starting now.
Well, I suppose it's a term that refers to an elite, people who are considered sexy or successful. If you look at the panel assembled here in front of you now, this possibly is the finest example of the Glitterati that you will find during the Edinburgh Festival. Can there be a more potent...
Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation.
I agree, yes. The Glitterati, with you, Clement, and 42 seconds available, starting now.
The Glitterati is Gary Glitter's email address. And I use it pretty frequently. Gary Glitterati.
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of Gary.
Yes, and glitter.
Glitter is all right, because it's...
No, Glitterati is the subject.
It's one of the words.
It's part of one of the words.
That's right.
Are we allowed to repeat letters that are in the words?
If you want to be argumentative,
like
yes.
if it's the Glitterati, can you say he?
Thank you for supporting me, Paul.
It's a good new rule. I like that rule. Is that new rule?
No, you had a correct challenge, Paul, and you have a point, and you have 32 seconds still. Tell us more about the Glitterati, starting now.
Glitterati consider themselves very lucky people if they spend the weekend at Nicholas Parsons' country retreat. This is where the Glitterati from 4 corners of the globe gather every Saturday, and they decide that they are going to worship the man.
Clement Freud challenge.
The globe is round. There are no...
Are you saying, Clement, you've never heard the phrase four corners of the globe?
I'm saying that unless you're a member of the Flat Earth Society...
Which I am. Membership number 7642.
And as we have to keep going colloquially, that is a well-known phrase from the 4 corners of the world. And so, therefore, we do accept the fact you can say the 4 corners of the globe as well. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to Paul. Say you still have 17 seconds. The Glitterati starting now.
I've got a square football at home. It's like an ordinary one, except it hasn't got so round as the ordinary ball that you would normally present.
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of ball.
Football, ball.
Yeah, football, ball.
You're starting a whole new rule. You're trying to press this one in. I'm not going to let you get away with it. No, football and ball are 2 separate words, and you are allowed to use them in just a minute. So, Paul, still 9 seconds for you on the Glitterati, starting now.
Let me take you back now to Hollywood in the 1920s. Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford are respectively king and queen of their realms, and Charlie Chaplin...
Paul Merton, speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point and has increased his lead at the end of the round. And Greg Proops, your turn to begin. The subject, duck. Tell us something about duck in just a minute, starting now.
Duck is one of the most tempting dishes you'll find here in the regional cuisine of the Scottish Highlands. It is often served after being beaten by the rake for 4 weeks so that there is no flavor left to offend the palate of the Scottish people. It is then liberally doused with salt, which is the only spice known in this area. If the duck survives this, it is served promptly to a family of Neeps and Tatties. Not as a side dish, but to the children themselves, who represent the vegetables hitherto mentioned. Turnips.
Paul mentioned.
Slight hesitation.
Paul Merton, another correct challenge. 19 seconds. You tell us something about duck, starting now.
One of my favourite versions of duck is the duck that is served in Chinese restaurants with that lovely fatty skin. I'd like to wrap it up in a pancake with little bits of sprout and perhaps some plum sauce. And as it's wound up in the flour, it tastes so beautiful on the tongue. It melts away at your taste buds and you think, oh, I'm in heaven.
Well, Paul's advert for crispy duck kept us going and whet all our appetites and increased his lead at the end of the round. And Peter Jones, back with you to begin. The subject, the best of a bad bunch. Take that subject any way you wish and tell us something about it in this game, starting now.
Well, if you look at a bunch of bananas and try to find the best one, then it usually is one that's got a lot of black on it, because it means that it's ripe and sugary. And I think I would choose that one.
Craig, challenge.
I'm going to say repetition of the word one.
Yes, he did use the one quite a lot there, yes.
I know it's the loneliest number, but in this case it's been joined by several other ones.
That's right. Correct challenge, Greg. You tell us something about the best of a bad bunch. 43 seconds available, starting now.
When I was in high school...
Peter, challenge.
Hesitation. Well, he said,
And Peter, you could have had him for repetition of her. But her is not a
I was actually naming a popular Norwegian group of the 80s.
I see.
You say, right. You've had so many benefits of my doubt over the years, Peter, that you shouldn't look like that.
No, I'm very happy, because I didn't want to go on talking about bloody bananas.
Greg Proops, an incorrect challenge. You have 39 seconds, the best of a bad bunch, starting now.
There were many kids at the school who made my life a constant torment. David Grunmeyer, Darrell Evans, their names were legion. And as I strolled across the playground, they would often take me off of my feet and butt drag me across the lawn. This was a pastime that they enjoyed greatly and that I found to be rather annoying. In that it made your bum hurt, 1, and 2, it ruined my delicious pink corduroy pants that my mother had made me. When I say trousers, of course,
Clement challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think there was a slight hesitation, Clement, so you have a correct challenge.
There was a hesitation.
Anyway, the best of a bad bunch is with you, Clement. 9 seconds to go, starting now.
If you have a bunch of daffodils and jonquils, and among those you find a forget-me-not, in my opinion, that is the best of a...
Clement Freud is speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point, has gained more points. He's moving up on our leader, Paul Merton. He's still in a strong second place, followed by Greg Proops and Peter Jones, equal in third place. And Clement, your turn to begin. The subject, an old-fashioned look. 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
In Greek torture, it was customary to stick a radish up the fundamental, and the person to whom this was done was often thought to have an old-fashioned look. But perhaps my idea of an old-fashioned look is if you drink an old-fashioned, which is a cocktail consisting of bourbon whiskey and vermouth, usually shaken with ice and sometimes elongated with soda water. And provided you imbibe a sufficiency of these cocktails, there is no reason why the expression on your face should not be designated as an old-fashioned look. Having 4, 5, or 6 of these potions would cause you to have an old-fashioned look squared or treble, possibly even cubed. It is an extraordinary thing that the intake of much vermouth and...
With half a second to go,
there was a repetition of vermouth.
There was a repetition of vermouth. You've got in. It was so brilliant, wasn't it? I will do to you, Clement, show how fair I am, what I did with Paul Merton.
Yes, I want the 59.5-second option.
That's right. Exactly. So give Clement 2 points, 1 for speaking when the whistle should have gone a quarter of a second earlier, and 1 for not being interrupted. But Paul did come in with the correct challenge, so you have another point, Paul, and you have half a second on an old-fashioned look, starting now.
Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
So Paul Merton with more points there, and also Clement Freud, and we're into the last round. And Paul, it's your turn to begin. Oh yes, this is a lovely subject because we talk about hesitation, repetition and deviation in this show. There's the 3 crimes or the rules of the game they must not commit. But no one's ever spoken on the subject of deviation. So Paul, take deviation. And talk on that subject for 60 seconds, if you can, starting now.
To deviate from the norm, I think, is generally a good thing, because it wouldn't do for us all to be the same. Imagine if the British Isles consisted of people who behaved like Clement Freud. What a happy-go-lucky nation we would be. Skipping joyfully through fields of buttercups with permanent grins on our faces. Tourists would know it as the land of the happy people, with no cares and sighs in their heart, as they gaily trip up and down the high streets and byways of this wonderful kingdom of ours. I think deviation is another way of saying that you're not going to conform to what people consider to...
Clement Freud challenged.
He repeated happy.
Yes, he did.
It was some time ago. I wanted
to... So, Clement, you have deviation. Sorry, that's rather badly phrased, wasn't it? The subject of deviation, 22 seconds available, starting now.
If you were to marry or cohabit with a goat...
Peter Jones challenge.
Not suitable for Radio 4.
So what is your challenge, Peter, within the rules of just a minute?
Obscenity.
Well, he wasn't actually deviating in the sense of the rules of just a minute, but we did enjoy the challenge so much, Peter, we give you a bonus point.
Well, I don't want charity.
This isn't charity, this is a bonus.
Oh, it is a
Yes,
bonus.
because the audience have loved your remarks so much, you get a bonus.
They
In
probably
fact,
wanted him to go on.
he is going on, actually.
Yes, he is,
In fact,
yes.
you've got 2 laughs, so give him 2 bonus points. Why not? The others have had 2 points on occasion. 2 bonus points, because we love your remarks. But deviation is still with Clement Freud, and the 15 seconds available, Clement. And, of course, Clement gets a point for being interrupted. Starting now.
And that quadruped with whom you shared accommodation was of the same sex as you. That would be deviation. I'm not sure I have much else to say, but when I went to boot the chemist...
Peter, you challenge.
You seem to want me to challenge. I don't know. Shall I go on?
No,
Do I have the subject?
No, if you have... If you give me the challenge of hesitation, yes.
Yes, hesitation.
Right, thank goodness. Well, listen, Peter. Yes, and as this is the last round, it's delightful to hear from you in this round. We did hear from you earlier on with your remarks, but you have 2 seconds to tell us something about deviation in just a minute, starting now.
It's a small town in Montana.
So, Peter Jones very aptly brought that particular round and also this particular show to a close. The final situation was that Greg Proops, who hasn't played the game for a long time, finished in 4th place. Peter Jones was in 3rd place, only just behind Clement Freud, but a few points out in the lead was Paul Merton with the most points. So this week we say, Paul, you are our winner. It only remains for me to say thank you to our 4 exciting players of the game, Paul Merton, Greg Proops, Peter Jones and Clement Freud, for their marvellous contributions. Jane Gibson sitting beside me blowing her whistle so adequately and vehemently like that. And Chris Neal, our producer, who does such a magnificent job, and also Ian Messiter, who created the show. And also we do thank this lovely audience here at the Pleasance of the Fringe in Edinburgh for encouraging us on our way. From them, from me, Nicholas Parsons, and our 4 panellists, thank you. Tune in the next time we play Just a Minute. Till then, goodbye. Welcome to Just a Minute. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the Minute Waltz fades away, once more it is my pleasure to welcome our many listeners, not only in the British Isles, but from the 4 corners of the world who listen to us on the World Service. But also, it's my pleasure to welcome our 4 exciting, dynamic, and diverse guests who this week are going to play Just a Minute. We have 3 regular players of the game, that is Paul Merton, Clement Freud, and Peter Jones, and also we welcome back somebody who's played it not quite as often as our regulars, and that is Richard Vranch. But will you please welcome all 4 of them? Right. As usual, I am going to ask them to speak on a subject that I will give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Beside me sits Jane Gibson, who's going to help me keep the score and blow a whistle with vehemence when the 60 seconds are up. And this particular edition of Just a Minute is coming from the peasants at the Edinburgh Fringe of '99. And before us we have an exciting, enthusiastic, dynamic Fringe audience to drive us on our way. And we're going to begin the show this week with Clement Freud. Clement, the subject in front of me is something I do only in Edinburgh. This could be interesting, couldn't it? 60 seconds as usual, and the time starts now.
Staying at the Balmoral and Caledonian hotels is something I do only in Edinburgh, as is watching Hibs and Hearts, Watsonians, Claymores, and racing at Musselburgh, which used to be called Edinburgh Racetrack. The Botanic Garden.
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Repetition to Edinburgh.
But Edinburgh's on the... Peter, I have to say this because I know you've only been playing with me for 35 years, but...
How long have you been doing the show?
Yeah. You can repeat the word on the card.
Yes,
or
I
if
forgot
it's a
what
phrase,
was on the card.
I know, it's dangerous.
Because I don't have a card, as you do. Otherwise, you'd be lost.
Yeah, that's right. So, Peter, actually, it was an incorrect challenge, so Clement Freud has a point for that. He keeps the subject. There are 40 seconds available. Something I do only in Edinburgh, starting now.
The suburbs of Morningside and Leith, where Glenmorangie is made to such very good effect. Waverley Station, only 4.5 hours by Great North Eastern Railways from King's Cross in London.
Paul Merton challenge.
Well, this isn't really about what I only do in Edinburgh. This is just a description of Edinburgh's sites and places.
Yes, it's not personalised.
Glasgow, can you?
You can recite Edinburgh place names in Glasgow. You can do it anywhere.
No, he didn't really personalise it enough. I quite agree. Therefore, we call that deviation, Paul, and you have a correct challenge. And a point for that, of course. And 25 seconds available. Something I do only in Edinburgh, starting now.
The one thing I only do in Edinburgh is get a pulmonary embolism, which I did in 1987 when I was up. I'm glad you find it funny. When I was up there playing the festival in that year, I'd been playing football with a bunch of people. I fell over. I broke my leg. That then turned into a blood clot that formed in the lung. I also developed hepatitis A.
Clement Freud challenge.
You could do that anywhere.
So far, I've only done it in Edinburgh.
Yes. And I agree with Paul that so far it's only happened in Edinburgh.
I haven't done it anywhere else.
Clement, but I enjoyed your comment, and what I do on those occasions, I give a bonus point because the audience enjoyed it as well. So a bonus point for Clement, but Paul Merton was interrupted, so he gets a point for that. He keeps the subject, something I do only in Edinburgh, and there are 5 seconds available starting now.
Climbing very slowly up Arthur's Seat is something I do every...
Whoever is speaking as the whistle goes gains an extra point. On this occasion, it was Paul Merton, and with the other points in the round, he's saying the leader for Clement Freud, and the other two have yet to score. Richard Vranch, will you take the next round? It is Double Agent. Tell us something about Double Agent in just a minute, starting now.
Well, a double agent is obviously the agent who books doubles. That's lookalikes of celebrities. So if someone's organising a garden fete and they'd like to have George Michael there, they phone the double agent who tells them, well, I have no one who resembles that particular singer from the band Wham, but I do have a fantastic Gary Barlow. Would you like him? The answer is no. And so the double agent has the sad task of going to the client.
Oh, yes, they were living every moment with you. Paul, you have a great challenge. What is your challenge?
Thank you for your psychic decision.
Yes, of course. 29 seconds available on Double Agent starting now.
Well, of course, it normally means somebody who's spying for the other side. Somebody like, perhaps...
Clement Freud challenge.
Two somebodies.
There were two somebodies.
Double agent. Two somebodies.
Well responded, but not within the rules of just a minute. Double agents with you, Clement, and 22 seconds available, starting now.
Well, it normally means somebody...
Peter Jones challenge.
Repetition of well.
Actually, Peter, he hasn't spoken in this round yet.
No, but he did.
I know.
But it was Clement speaking then.
It was?
Yes, it was Clement.
He's disguised his voice.
I know. 19 seconds, another point to you, Clement, and double agent still with you, starting now.
A double agent occasionally spies for one side, and now and again for the other.
Yes. Full challenge.
Full stop.
Full stop. Which we say is a hesitation. So, Paul, you've got in with 11 seconds on double agent, starting now.
You get these very good tablets.
Clement Freud challenge.
Deviation.
Why?
He didn't say well.
He doesn't always say
Yes, he does.
well. No, he doesn't always say
Lately, he has
as long as
taken...
you only say it once in a while.
Oh, they do love arguing. If they only say it once in a round, it doesn't really matter. So, anyway, we enjoyed what you said, Clement. I'll give you a bonus point because the audience enjoyed your remark. And, Paul, you have a point for being interrupted. 9 seconds. Double agent starting now.
For the dishwasher, which includes a rinsing agent. So as you put this particular merchandise into the machine, it has a dual action. In many ways, you could...
So Paul Merton was speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point, and he's just ahead of Clement Freud. He's out in the lead. And Paul Merton, it's your turn to begin as well. The subject, green fingers. I don't know if you are a gardener or not, but tell us something about the subject in this game, starting now.
Gangrene is a terrible thing. It's one of the few diseases I haven't picked up here in Edinburgh. I've had hepatitis A, I've had blood clot of the lung, and a broken leg, but never the aforementioned illness that I just referred to. What do you mean, which?
Which...
Is he allowed to do that?
No, of course not.
Is he allowed to ask me questions in the middle of my diatribe? He's ruined me flow. He's ruined me flow there.
He'll do anything to try and get the point. But actually, it was Richard Vranch's light who came on first. So, Richard, you're the first to challenge. What's your challenge?
Was there a repetition of illness?
No.
No. He mentioned illness before, but he didn't mention illness
in another
again.
round.
Well, I'm wrong then.
You're right, I know, but you're wrong, but it was nice to hear from you again, Richard, yes. So Paul still has the subject and another point, and green fingers, and 46 seconds starting now.
It's a term usually used to describe people who are very good at growing plants. Prince Charles has his reputation. Apparently he talks to his flowers and says to them, "Come up, buttercup, spread your beautiful yellow face to the blue sky. Let me see you embrace the rays of the sun." And the aforementioned flower says, "Oh, you're a bit odd talking to me, aren't you?" "I am not odd. Indeed, I am..."
Right. Clement, yes, you challenge first.
2 odds.
2 odds, yes, Clement, you got in first. 21 seconds. Green fingers starting now.
I do not have green fingers. I'm totally hopeless at gardening, mainly because I don't know one flower from another, with the exception of forget-me-nots, which I recognize instantly and can tell from tulips, rhododendrons, roses.
Full challenge.
There was a hesitation there.
I don't know any other flowers.
You were making a rod for your own back there, weren't you? Or should I say trellis?
And you got your pruning shears out and snipped away in there very rapidly, with only 3 seconds to go on the subject of green fingers, Paul, starting now.
If you haven't got a handkerchief and you've got a runny nose, you can often end up...
Well, Paul Merton and Clement Freud both got a lot of points in that round. Paul, the extra one for speakers, the whistle went. Peter Jones, it's your turn to begin. The subject, volcano. Can you explode on that subject? With 60 seconds to go, starting now.
No, I can't actually explode. But it doesn't seem a very good subject, really. But...
Clement Freud challenge.
Deviation.
Well,
I think it's a very good subject.
That is a matter of opinion.
It's my opinion.
So he can have an opinion as long as he doesn't hesitate, repeat himself, or deviate. So, an incorrect challenge, Peter. And you have a point for that, of course, which is very exciting. And you have 54 seconds, which is not so exciting. To keep going on Volcano, starting now.
I know Rossellini made a film about Stromboli with Ingrid Bergman, with whom he was living at the time. And they made a kind of movie out of it, but it wasn't, I've repeated movie once. But nobody was listening.
And you pressed your buzzer and challenged yourself.
Yes,
So that was very well listened, Peter.
Yeah.
Congratulate you on your perception and say that you still have Volcano. And you still have 37 seconds, and you start now.
It can be very nasty because all this lava springs out of the earth and a lot of red-hot coals, and it pours down the side of the mountain from which it has erupted, and it's not at all pleasant for the people who live there. And there is an island in the South Atlantic, I think it is, isn't it, where they had this experience.
Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation.
There was a lot of hesitation on the face.
A lot.
Well, I mean, enough. For a man who hasn't said much on the show, you won this audience over rapidly. You want him to carry on, do you? Well, it's a bit...
Are we to be ruled by the mob?
Yes. Peter, they want you to continue on Volcano for some reason. With 16 seconds to go, and you get a point, of course, for that, because the audience decided you should continue. Starting now.
I've been in southern Italy, and on the beaches there are lots of lumps of...
Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation.
9 seconds, Clement. Volcano starting now.
There are many disasters in the world, but few have given so much.
Richard Vranch's challenge.
Bit mean. Was there a hesitation?
The war.
We're one step away from somebody producing a rope.
I know.
It's a fine line.
Right. Richard, the audience decided that you should go for 5 seconds on Volcano, with a point, of course, starting now.
In mix?
Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation, I'm afraid.
Another point to you, Richard. There we are. You have 3 seconds on Volcano, starting now.
Popocatépetl is the volcano in Mexico, the most wonderful country.
And Richard Vranch and Peter Jones have leapt forward with the help of the mob. But they're both equal still in third place. Behind Clement Freud, and Paul Merton is still out in the lead. And in case we get letters, I think that film to Stromboli to which you referred was not with Ingrid Bergman. I think it was Anna Magnani. I just mentioned that to save the letters coming in.
Why, you need every letter you can get.
Some letters I welcome, but I wouldn't mention them on this program. Now, Richard, it's your turn to begin. The subject is Gizmos. Tell us something about Gizmos in 60 seconds, if you can, starting now.
Fantastic devices you can buy these days that do jobs you never needed to do before. For example, in the kitchen, you can get gizmos which peel.
Peter Jones' challenge.
Repetition of do.
A minute ago, you were all for him. You are the most fickle audience of the day. But it was a correct challenge. Well done,
yes,
Peter.
it was.
Yes, the rest. Gizmos is with you, Peter Jones. 49 seconds available, starting now.
I have no idea what they are.
Richard Vranch's challenge.
Well, then it's deviation, because you can't talk about them if he doesn't know what they are.
Gizmos is back with you, Richard, with another point, and there are 46 seconds available, starting now.
The very first gizmo was made by an Italian called Giuseppe Gizmo, and in his workshop at the back of his hacienda, he came up with the thing that did something that no one else had ever dreamed possible. It was a small black box that plugged into the wall, and when you switched it on, it started to flash. Little things came out electronically, aerials, buttons, and still it was uncertain why he'd made the thing. But eventually, everything became clear.
And Paul Merton, new challenge. Yes.
It was a hesitation.
Yeah. 17 seconds on Gizmos, starting now.
I'm quite fond of gizmos. One of the things I've bought recently, which I think is a wonderful invention, is a CD recording machine. It means that you can put a compact disc in it, a blank one, and then record music onto that, and you can give it to people as presents. You can say, here you are. In fact, I think I bought one for Richard for his birthday. I said, here's a lovely CD.
Paul Merton gaining more points, including that one for speaking as the whistle went, has increased his lead over Clement Freud at the end of that round. Then Peter Jones and Richard Vranch in that order. And Paul, your turn to begin. The subject, the twinkle in my eye. Tell us something about the twinkle in my eye in this game, starting now.
Well, I'm so pleased to be up here in Edinburgh playing Just a Minute. Many years ago, when I lived in a bedsit in the 1980s, I used to listen to this programme, and if I'd known then that sometime in the future I would find myself on this distinguished panel playing this marvellous invention, I would have been so happy and pleased. My eye, somebody's watch is bleep. Can you turn your watch off, please? Put me off. And there was a bleep in the audience which I didn't put me off at all, but a twinkle in my eye is still...
Peter Jones' challenge.
Repetition of bleep.
This person down here may be a paid agent of Peter Jones.
So, Peter, you got in with the correct challenge. Another point to you. 34 seconds available. The twinkle in my eye starting now.
Well, I think it must be a symptom of yet another disease that poor old Paul has suffered from, usually through coming to Edinburgh, as far as I can understand. He doesn't seem to catch much when he's in London, but then I suppose he's not working very much there.
Richard Vranch challenge.
What?
Bit of hesitation.
Richard Vranch challenged you.
Bit of
yes,
hesitation.
Richard Vranch, yes. Hello.
Right, Richard, a correct challenge. A point to you and 17 seconds. The twinkle in my eye starting now.
I've known you since you were a twinkle in your father's eye. That's what we say to people who've been with us all our lives. It does imply rather that they were there at the conception. This, of course, is not to be recommended, and the twinkle in someone's eye should not be confused with the eye in someone's twinkle.
Richard Vranch kept going to the whistle, gained that extra point for doing so, and I think he was saved by the buzzer or saved by the bell, because he couldn't have followed that particular line very easily. And Clement, it's your turn to begin. The subject is Cellar. Tell us something about Cellar. 60 seconds starting now.
The odds against continuing for 60 seconds on the subject of Cellar without somebody interrupting are very long indeed, perhaps 33 to 1. But I will attempt. Cellar is a subterranean room, vault, crypt, dungeon, in which you may keep something as lovely as wine, which can be red or white or pink, still or sparkling, and could come from the Rhone or...
Peter, you've challenged. What was your challenge?
Well, he's talking about wine all the time
Well,
instead of...
hasn't he?
Yes, he has, yes. One interpretation of it, yes.
So, Peter, 26 seconds on Cellar, starting now.
Well, it can be, as Clement...
Poor challenge.
Very slight hesitation.
Which was rather a drawn-out slight hesitation.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was.
Yes, so 20 seconds for you on Cellar, Paul, starting now.
You may remember that remarkable sequence in Alfred Hitchcock film Psycho, where the lady runs into the house, I hadn't finished the word. I was saying run. I said runs first time, and I said run the second time. A long run, I admit.
You said runs, and Richard Vranch spotted it and came in very rapidly. Richard, a correct challenge. And you have 11 seconds on Cellar, starting now.
A seller is completely useless unless there's a buyer to buy the thing which he is selling. For example, if I have a used car, I am the seller, and I wish to come across...
So Richard Vranch, speaking as the whistle wing, gained that extra point. He has moved forward. He's still in fourth place, but only one behind Peter Jones, who's only one behind Clement Freud, and he's a few behind Paul Merton. That is the sequence, and Richard Vranch, your turn to begin. The subject, what this audience needs to know. Having looked at them and heard them, I don't think they need to know anything. They seem to know it all already. But talk on that subject, and 60 seconds are available starting now.
What this audience needs to know is where they can go and get a drink after they've finished watching this recording of Just a Minute. And of course, because we're in the city of Edinburgh, their choice is almost limitless. And furthermore, they will not be thrown out onto the cold streets at 11 o'clock, because Scotland has proper licensing laws where we can drink all night, unlike down south of the border.
Peter Jones' challenge.
Repetition of drink.
Yes, there was a lot of drink there. Yes. He was keeping going under pressure from the audience, encouraging him and applauding their own city there. Richard, no, it isn't. Richard's lost it. Peter, you've got it, and you have 38 seconds.
I've lost it.
Well, not lost it completely. You lost the subject. What this audience needs to know, Peter, with you, starting now.
Well, there are at least 200 alternative venues where you can be entertained, apart from coming here. And I strongly advise you to take up one of those invitations. And I think if you just look at the programs and the things that are stuck on walls, and the magazine here, which is full of ghastly-looking people, they can be patronized.
Richard Vranch challenge.
Slight hesitation.
There was, yes, and those ghastly-looking people, and I turned up a picture of Richard Vranch. Right. Richard, a correct challenge. And 7 seconds. What this audience needs to know starting now.
What this audience needs to know is that afterwards we'll all be going back to the hotel and cramming into Nicholas Parsons' jacuzzi. It's an enormous...
So at the end of that round, Richard Vranch, speaking as a whistle, gained that extra point. And now it's an interesting situation. Richard Vranch, Clement Freud and Peter Jones are all equal in second place, just behind Paul Merton, who's still in the lead. And Paul, it's your turn to begin. The subject is eating my words. Interesting subject.
Yeah,
Talk on it if you
isn't
can, starting now.
I've been guilty on occasions of making rash statements which have proved to be wrong. I remember seeing the Sex Pistols on television in a programme called So It Goes in late 1975, and I predicted very confidently to the associated people in the room, I said, that group are useless and will never get anywhere.
Clement Freud challenge.
Deviation.
Why?
Grammar. That group is useless.
Clement, we've had this before. I know it's deviation from grammar as we understand it, as it is normally written. But in colloquially spoken English, we often use those sort of phrases. And
That group are.
What's that?
That group are.
Yes.
That's what I said.
That's what it said. And if he's going to go in a colloquial way, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Give you a bonus point for correct challenge, but say Paul keeps the subject because he can speak colloquially if he wishes. Eating my words is with you, Paul, starting now.
One year I was very hungry and I ate my diary for 1992. And I found that particularly the adjectives were quite chewy, but when you got to the verbs, oh, they were delicious. They could have been cooked beautifully by perhaps one of the finest chefs in the world. The adverbs stuck in the back of my throat. But other than that, the vowels were very nice. The consonants gave me a bit of jip, bit of a funny tummy there. But apart from that, I generally think that eating your words is a very good thing to do, because if you do make these rather over-the-top remarks and you say, I declare this to be the way that things always are and will be forever in time, people can say, well, how do you know? How can you... what?
Clement Freud challenge.
Oh, grammar, was it? Was it grammar?
No.
Oh, that makes a change.
4 do's.
There were 4 do's.
Yes.
Clement, you cleverly got in with only 1 second to go.
No.
Yeah. After all your hard work, Paul, it's a vicious game. It's a tough game. Eating my words is with you, Clement, starting now.
Indigestible.
Right. So, at the end of that round, Paul Merton is still in the lead. Clement Freud is catching up on him. The other two are now a little way behind in third place. That's Peter Jones and Richard Vranch. And we're into the last round. You've enjoyed it, have you? Right. Well, enjoy the last round as well, because Peter Jones is going to begin it. And the subject is a lovely Scottish one, Neeps and Tatties. Or tell us something about Neeps and Tatties in this show, if you possibly can, Peter. Right, you've got 60 seconds. Starting now.
Well, I object because I don't think anybody else in this panel has had 2 subjects thrown at them at the same time. They're 2 quite distinct items, and I don't see why I should talk about them. It's just like saying cats and dogs is a subject. How can one possibly discuss that?
Do you want me to answer? Peter, you've challenged yourself again.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I just it's an objection.
You challenge yourself.
There are a number of very unfair things going on. Clement Freud has a much shorter electric wire to the bell than I have.
But you did actually hesitate, and you were the first one to spot it. And you pressed your buzzer, so you got a correct challenge. And you had 35 seconds available starting now.
Do I have a minute for each one?
You better get moving. You've got Richard Vranch's challenge.
There was a hesitation
There was
there.
a long hesitation there, yes. Richard Vranch, you have a correct challenge. You have 28 seconds on Neeps and Tatties, starting now.
Neeps and Tatties were 2 of the least successful gladiators on the ITV programme. They didn't quite make it to the televised heats. Of course, the others, like Wolf, made it there, and we didn't really see the full scope of the skills of Neep or Tatty. The merchandising all went to waste, as nobody bought a single item. No baseball caps or shirts or trainers emblazoned with the faces of Neep or Tatty. But of course, Neeps and Tatties are the...
Well, very aptly and very delightfully, Richard Vranch, who's not played the game as much as the other three, brought that round to a close with a resounding round of applause and also brought the show to a close. And we have a very interesting situation at the end because Richard Vranch, Clement Freud and Peter Jones are almost equal in second place. Oh, really? Only 1 point separates all three of them, but a few points ahead of all those three is Paul Merton. And so today we say, Paul, you are the winner. So it only remains for me to say thank you to these four delightful players of the game, Paul Merton, Clement Freud, Peter Jones and Richard Vranch. We also thank Jane Gibson for blowing her whistle so magnificently. We also thank Ian Messiter, who created the game, and Chris Neal, our producer and director. And we are also most grateful for this delightful fringe audience here at the Pleasance in Edinburgh, who've cheered us on our way so admirably. From them, from our panel, from me, Nicholas Parsons, hope you've enjoyed the show. Tune in the next time we play Just a Minute. Until then, from all of us, goodbye. Welcome to Just a Minute. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the Minute Waltz fades away, once more it is my pleasure to welcome our many listeners throughout the world, but also the four talented, individual, regular, and superlative players. I was thinking they're all so good, they've played it so many times before. So let me just say that we're delighted to welcome back Paul Merton, Tony Hawks, Peter Jones, and Clement Freud. And will you please welcome all four of them? And I'm going to ask them to speak, as usual, on the subject that I give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. And beside me sits Jane Gibson, who's going to help me keep the score, and she will blow a whistle when 60 seconds are up. This particular edition of Just a Minute is coming from the Grand Opera House in York. And we're going to begin this week with Clement Freud. And the subject, isn't this an amazing coincidence? The subject is York. Clement, will you tell us something about York in just a minute, starting now?
The noble Duke of York, he had 10,000 men. And he marched them all to the top of the hill, and I've always wondered how it went on after that. Ask the ordinary 100 usual people what they connect with York, and the answer is likely to be ham. Jambon de York. The matured, dried, cured, salted hind leg of a pig.
Paul Merton, you have challenged.
Hesitation?
Yes, I think there was hesitation. And whoever gets a correct challenge gains a point for that, and this occasion was Paul Merton. He takes over the subject. There are 33 seconds available. Paul, it's still York with you, starting now.
I would like to address my comments to the rest of the world who are listening to this particular programme. The good inhabitants of York are known as Yorkers. You will know this as a cricketing term when the ball goes a funny way and then comes back again. And that is, it really was originated here.
Tony Hawk's the challenge.
He's getting too technical for me.
The ball goes a funny way, then it comes back again.
So what is your challenge, Tony?
Deviation from being... I haven't got one.
Well, that's honest, because a Yorker in cricket actually is a ball that lands in the crease. It's not one
Well,
that
there we
comes
are.
back
Well,
again.
I'll have that then.
Right, it's too late now. It doesn't come back again. It was too late. Tony, you attempted a challenge which failed. So, for an incorrect challenge, Paul keeps the subject, and a point for an incorrect challenge. 17 seconds on York, Paul, starting now.
As Nicholas said earlier, it is a beautiful city to walk around. There is a wonderful atmosphere to feel cobbled stones beneath your feet, sometimes under your head if you've had a big night.
Tony challenged.
Repetition of under.
Yes.
Beneath and under. Two different words, I think.
Two different words, you're quite right, yes.
Oh, right.
I mean, not only are they spelt differently, but they are pronounced differently as well. In my book, that makes them different. I'm a bit old-fashioned about these things, I know.
Yes, an incorrect challenge. Another point to Paul Merton, and he still has the subject. And 6 seconds available. York starting now.
The Yorkie chocolate bar is an extraordinary invention. If you look at it, you...
Clement Freud challenge.
It's not an invention.
Well, what is it?
You mean it was a gift from God?
Paul, I think you made your point. I give you the benefit of the doubt. Another point to you for an incorrect challenge. 1 second on York, starting now.
York!
Whoever is speaking when the whistle blows gains an extra point. On this occasion, it was Paul Merton, and at the end of that round, he's the only one to have scored any points at all. Tony Hawks. The subject now is inferiority complex. I don't know why they've given this one to you, because the last time we were in York, you established for us that you were an international toy boy. Talk on the subject. 60 seconds are available, starting now.
I am not fit to speak on this subject. The people before me are far more talented than I. Already Paul Merton in the previous round spotted that I had made a mistake, suggesting that he repeated the word under when he cleverly used beneath. What a fool I am! I am suffering with an inferiority complex when normally I have a superiority complex based on the fact that I'm fantastic. But on this occasion, I'm feeling down in the dumps, not my normal self. I may go out after this show, and instead of sharing my beautiful body with the women of York, I will probably go back to my hotel room, maybe put the kettle on and have some of those little chocolate biscuits that they give you so delightfully, and just put my head down and fall asleep and think, oh, I wish I could play that game better. I could have spoken for a minute without being interrupted, or repeating myself, or deviating, but...
Clement Freud, you challenge.
Repetition of all.
Exactly my point. I'm not good enough.
It wasn't a popular challenge, Clement, but it was a correct challenge, so I have to be fair within the rules of just a minute to say yes. So, Clement, a correct challenge, and you have said he went for 53 seconds. That should kill any inferiority complex you've got, Tony. Anyway, Clement, correct challenge. 7 seconds still available on inferiority complex, starting now.
A man went to a psychoanalyst who examined him most carefully and said, no, you really are inferior.
Clement Freud was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so, so he has got some points, and he's just behind our leader, Paul Merton. Peter Jones, it's your turn to begin, and the subject is simply pudding. Tell us something about pudding in just a minute, starting now.
Well, the British have contributed a great deal to the culinary art of puddings, and that doesn't include Yorkshire puddings, because they're not sweet or dessert kind of that kind. But the other kind, bread and butter pudding.
Paul Merton challenge.
There were quite a few kinds.
Yes, there were quite a few kinds.
Yes, there were, yeah.
The kinds, yes, there were, yes.
I heard myself sing.
Yes.
And I thought, what a pity. I don't like repeating myself, even in this ludicrous game.
But the public enjoy it, Peter.
They do?
Yes. That's why they ask you back, because they enjoy you as well.
Well, good luck to them.
Paul, you had a correct challenge. Pudding is the subject. 42 seconds available, starting now.
Well, if you want to make a sticky toffee pudding, it's very simple. First of all, you have to get a load of sticky...
Tony, you challenge first.
Yes, I think there's a repetition of sticky.
Yes, he got stuck with his sticky, didn't he? That's right. Tony, a point to you and the subject. 37 seconds. Pudding, starting now.
When I was at school, I was made to eat bread and butter pudding by Mrs. Andrews, my dinner lady, and this was so upsetting to me because I didn't like currants, and they were specifically in this particular pudding. And she said to me, eat it, Hawks, or I will take you to see the headmaster. Now, this was no kind of a threat, really, because he was only a small man and I wasn't frightened of him, being a tough guy with a superiority complex. However, I once went and he said to me, Hawks, I've said...
Clement Freud challenge.
2 hawks.
Yes, 2 hawks, 2 sets. But 5 seconds, Clement. You've got another point. You have pudding, and you start now.
If you soak the sultanas in apricot brandy, you do get a quite specifically good...
So Clement Freud, speaking as the whistle Wayne, gained that extra point, has moved forward. He's still in second place behind our leader, Paul Merton. And Clement, it's your turn to begin. The subject is flannel. Tell us something about flannel in this game, starting now.
Flannel is a sort of portmanteau word, a noun, a verb. In its verbal form, it can be animal, vegetable, or mineral. You flannel people in order to impress them, to persuade them that the inferiority complex which you actually have does not exist. Flanneling is a tremendously popular thing in politics because you say to your constituents what absolutely fine people you are. Nobody understands the extraordinary depth of your knowledge, the understanding, and your political finesse. And vote for me, and I promise that we will receive the absolutely perfect vote on every occasion. I've said vote twice.
I know. They were so carried away they're all about to vote for you, actually, again, Tony. You were nearly back in Parliament. Tony, you challenge first. 12 seconds on flannel, starting now.
Nicholas Parsons is wearing a magnificent blue jacket with a tie the finest I've ever seen. Now, this is an example of flannel. Clearly, they're rubbish. I would not flannel somebody just for the sake of it, certainly not to win votes.
Tony Hawks, speaking as the whistle Wayne, gained that extra point. He's moved forward. He's now in third place. And Tony, it's your turn to begin. The subject is the bait. Tell us something about the bait, starting now.
The bait you use can vary depending on whether you're trying to catch a fish or, say, a spy. For one, you need a worm, and the other one may be a leggy call girl or something like that. I've caught many a halibut using...
Peter Jones, this challenge.
I didn't quite hear what you said last. A leggy what?
A leggy call girl.
Oh, leggy call girl, yes. Didn't hear that.
I know. Peter. Right. A leggy call girl.
Yes.
Are you happy for him to continue now?
Yes, I'd like to hear more about her.
Yeah. Right. Oh, I see now. You wanted to be clearly in the picture of what he was talking about. So,
right.
But of course, Tony gets a point because he was interrupted. There are 45 seconds available. The bait starting now.
My favourite kind of bait is white bait. Fantastic little fish it is. They put little breadcrumbs on them. I'm sure Clement will be able to tell more about it when he gets the subject from me when I stutter or make a mistake in a second. But however, for the moment, I will tell you about this teeny, teeny little thing.
It's a tough game. It's so difficult.
It's one word, teeny, teeny, isn't it?
Hyphenated.
Right, Paul, a correct challenge. 30 seconds. Tell us something about the bait starting now.
Of course, if you are an international toy boy, you find leggy call girls do not need any bait. They flock to you as you promenade through the finest beaches of Europe, whether you find yourself in Nice or Venice, which doesn't have any particular sandy area that you could call that thing that I referred to earlier, but it doesn't matter because it's the spirit of the occasion. You wander along, your head held high as the girls look at you and...
Tony Hawk's challenge.
I think there's a bit of deviation here. I don't think he's really talking about... He's just talking about me, which is fine. But I don't think he's really talking about the bait anymore.
No, I think he's got away from the bait. I do think so, yes. He got so carried away with this image of creator, this international toy boy, that he was on with that. And so, you've cleverly got in with 1 second to go, Tony, on the bait starting now.
Chocolate is something...
Tony Hawks was then speaking as a whistle when gained that extra point of doing so. And Paul, it is your turn to begin. Subject now, Paul, is double bill. Tell us something about that subject in just a minute, starting now.
Genetic engineering is a very strange world, and particularly when applied to the duck. There are unfortunate birds who are now wandering the face of this earth with a double bill. It's not clever for scientists to muck around playing God. If nature intended these poor, unfortunate creatures to have double bills, then he surely would have made that choice very early in the evolutionary scale. It also refers to a practice...
Clement, you challenge first.
Repetition. Hesitation.
Hesitation.
I think we have to take the first challenge.
But he corrected himself before I spoke, so I'm allowed to say what he said last.
All right. That's the rule, is it?
No, it isn't. I just have to justify everything because they're so dead keen, which is good. I'm not discouraging it. 31 seconds, double bills with you, Clement, starting now.
If you stay in a hotel and have breakfast, lunch, tea and dinner, and some drink, coffee, tea, and you ask for your account, and they give it you and it is twice as much as you thought, the answer is they have double billed you, the bastards.
That's nice talk, isn't it? That's nice. Lovely talk. To have that go all over the world.
That's what I thought. Because this show really does go to every country in the world. We get letters.
I don't think that bastards is a term of endearment. You get Chinese people going to hotels. I'd like the bill, please, bastard.
Tony Hawks, you challenge.
Yeah, well, I'm staying in the same hotel as him, so I think it's important we get the subject off him before we all have our stuff thrown out.
He got his big laugh, he made his point, and he hesitated, and it's double bill with you, Tony, and 11 seconds are available starting now.
What are you drinking? Asked William, and I said, I'll have a double bill. This was one of the most exciting stories.
Paul Merton challenged.
Well, you haven't answered his question. He's asked you what you're drinking, you've given him the measurement.
Actually, sometimes people do say, I'll have a double.
Do they?
Yes.
And you've known this to happen?
I've known this to happen. Incorrect challenge, 4 seconds available. Tony, with you, starting now.
I was almost on a double bill with Paul Merton many years back during the Edinburgh Festival, however...
Tony Hawks with points in that round, including 1 for speaking as the whistle went, has moved forward. He's now only 3 behind Paul Merton, our leader, 2 ahead of Clement Freud. Peter Jones is trailing just a little, and Peter, it's your turn to begin. The subject, that's a nice one, snakes and ladders. Tell us something about that delightful game in just a minute, starting now.
I don't know why you think that's a nice one. It sounds terribly boring to me.
And they give it you, and it is twice as much as you thought.
Well, my son happens to be called Bill, and he works in radio. He was able to conceal his relationship to me, and so he got in quite easily. Anyway, the snakes and ladders was a game that one used to be forced to play when one was a child, like Ludo, and 1 or 2 other really footling games that I felt was an insult to my intellectual capacity at that time when I was 7 or 8. And I didn't ever like it, and don't like it now.
The Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of like it.
You didn't like it?
No, I didn't.
I must say... But we love what you did.
Yes.
That's the important thing. And you've actually made a first in just a minute, because for 30 seconds you talked on the previous subject. and nobody bothered. And then you went over to the subject of this particular round.
Quite.
And then you repeated something. It's a pity you didn't keep going, because only 6 seconds are left.
Oh, what a pity.
Pity. But anyway, Clement got him with the correct challenge. I've got to be fair within the rules of just a minute. Clement, you have 6 seconds. Snakes and ladders starting now.
I actually preferred Lotto and Halmer, but snakes and ladders on a wet afternoon.
Yes, so Clement Freud got points in that round. He's now equal with Tony Hawks in second place, equal behind Paul Merton. And Clement, it's your turn to begin. The subject is chop suey. Tell us something about chop suey in just a minute, starting now.
Chop suey will be found as number 19 at the Ming Cottage, 23 at the Lotus Tree, and 34 at Fokyo To in Battersea Park Road in London. And I cannot recommend this dish sufficiently. You get suey and you put it on a board and you chop. You can use a knife or, if you're Chinese, a cleaver, which is immensely sensible. And then you go chop, 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 suey, suey, suey.
Oh, Paul.
No, he's bluffed me here because he said chop and chop. I buzzed for repetition, but of course it's on the subject, chop suey, so it's an incorrect challenge.
Clement, 26 seconds are still available for chop suey starting now.
Is not at all a classic dish from the Orient, but the sort of thing that those coming from eastern regions...
Tony challenge.
I think there was a hesitation.
Yes, a big hesitation, yes. I think he was thinking of all our Chinese listeners and what they might write in.
I don't think Nicholas is in agreement there. No, sorry, he's not Nicholas either, is he?
My name is Nicholas, by the way, yes. Right.
Lovely to meet you.
Right. 16 seconds for you, Tony. Chop suey starting now.
The big debate up and down the country is which is better, chop suey or chow mein. People in every pub or club are discussing this at heated volume, if you can have that.
Peter Jones, the challenge.
It's just ridiculous. Of course they aren't discussing that.
I would be inclined to agree with you, Peter.
You must go to different pubs to me, that's all I can say.
No,
Peter, deviation. I agree.
There's a very good reason for that.
You cleverly got in with 3 seconds to go on chop suey starting now.
Chop suey isn't Chinese, it's an American dish.
Peter Jones was speaking as the whistle went and gained that extra point. He's still, alas, in 4th place. Tony Hawks, your turn to begin. Oh dear, this is interesting. Let's hear from this international toy boy. You didn't know this was coming up, did you, Tony? My best chat-up lines. Tell us something about it. 60 seconds are available, starting now.
Excuse me, young lady, but do you know the way to Oldham? Is not an example of a good line. I am an international toy boy, as Nicholas has pointed out, and no doubt this is the reason why I have been given this subject. I honestly can tell you a line that I have used in the past, and it is, excuse...
Clement, you challenged.
I'd like to hear the story, but he did say...
He did repeat line, yes. Clement, 39 seconds. You tell us something about my best chat-up line starting now.
Would you like to eat a Chinese hamburger? Sometimes goes quite well, better than an American chop suey. But I was a member as a child of the Ovaltinis, and instead of having a chat-up line, you had gestures which gave you the sort of message to other people they wanted to hear. If you put your left forefinger on the side of your nose, it meant, will you come home with me after school? Whereas the right digit in a similar position intended to convey someone is trying to find out our secrets. So why this...
So, I don't think those chat-up lines have got me very far. What was your best one? Come on, what was it, Tony?
I don't think I'm going to share this with you. You're going to use it, Nicholas, aren't you?
You don't share it with me, you share it with the audience. They want to hear it. They're dying to hear it. They need a few new chat-up lines in York. They really do.
This is the truth, but I did use this line for a long time, and it was, what's the capital of Poland? And it used to work really well, actually, because if people knew it, they'd go Warsaw, and then you'd be chatting away. And if they didn't know it, they'd think, he's a clever bloke, I think I want to talk to him, he knows what the capital of Poland is.
They're giving a whole new meaning to life up here, right. So, who was speaking as Clement Freud was speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point, and with other points in that round, he's leapt forward, and he's now equal in the lead with Paul Merton, followed by Tony Hawks, and then Peter Jones in that order. And this round coming up is going to be the last round. So if those interested in the score, it's anybody's contest still, except Peter Jones has got a little...
Oh, that's good for morale, isn't it? You've got to give him something to fight for.
He has little chance of getting the points, but he's every chance of winning the show because I know you love him dearly. There we are. The subject is window shopping, and Paul, it's your turn to begin, so 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
As I go window shopping, I often think about my best chat-up line, which is, I'm a personal friend of Nicholas Parsons. Window shopping as a practice doesn't strike me as being particularly interesting. I've never been one for gazing through windows, just idly passing away the time. If I do go shopping, it's generally with an intention of going to buy something. So I will walk into a shop knowing what I want, seeing it, and purchasing.
Peter Jones is challenged.
Repetition of shop.
Yes. So you're coming with a flourish at the end, Peters. I knew you would. There we are.
Oh, thank you.
And the point, you have 34 seconds. You tell us something about window shopping starting now.
Well, it's a rather tedious business if you don't have any money and you can't afford to buy anything. So what is the point of looking at all this merchandise that is laid out before you, sometimes quite attractively, but I wouldn't want to...
Clement Freud challenge.
I think there was hesitation.
There was a hesitation, but I'm not going to allow it. Because I think this audience here... Last time we were here, Peter, you finished the last round. I think they'd like to hear Peter finish the show again, wouldn't you? Yes! There you are, you see, Peter. You may not get the points, but you have the love of this audience here. And you have 18 seconds to tell us more about window shopping starting now.
One of the most attractive windows in our area.
Paul Merton challenge.
I would like Peter to finish as well.
Right. Another point to you, Peter.
Yes.
And you have 15 seconds. Window shopping starting now.
In this particular district.
And, yes?
Repetition of glove puppet.
You're not listening very well.
Really not? I'm sorry. Another point to Peter then. Sorry.
Another point. 14 seconds window shopping with you, Peter, starting now.
An awfully nice window just on the corner, and it is an undertaking.
Didn't he say that before?
Of course he didn't say it before, so he gets another point. That's an incorrect challenge. 10 seconds on window shopping, Peter, starting now.
And it's a funeral director.
Paul?
Can I just say this is descended into a farce? Sorry, that's an incorrect challenge. I do apologise.
I know, but we like to get a bit farcical on occasions. It's great fun. Peter, you and I worked in many farces in our time together. Let us finish
that again?
7 seconds on window shopping with you, Peter, starting now.
An undertaker's, actually. Very large bunch of flowers and a coffin in the front. And...
Well, who can say that the impossible never happens? At the beginning of that round, we had two equal leaders, very talented players of the game, and then we had another one who was just 1 point behind them, and we had one of our players who was training quite considerably, but with incredible flourish, with a minuscule little bit of help from the other players of the game.
I wouldn't like to think it was patronage at all.
With sheer talent and this encouragement from this audience, Peter Jones has leapt forward from 5 points to 15. Never happened before. It'll probably be a long time before it happens again. But Peter, you're the winner this week.
Really?
So, it only remains for me to say my thanks to the four talented and outstanding players of this game. Peter Jones, Clement Freud, Paul Merton and Tony Hawkes. Also thank Jane Gibson, who's blown her whistle so delicately and charmingly, helped me with the score, and Ian Messiter, who created the game, which we all enjoy playing so much, and also our producer and director, Chris Neal. We also thank our audience here at the Grand Opera House in York.
who've cheered us on our way, from our audience here, from the panel, from me, Nicholas Parsons. Tune in again the next time we play. Just a minute. Till then, goodbye.
Next Monday's edition is the last in the current series. You can hear tonight's edition again. No bonus points for spotting that incidence of repetition on Sunday at midday.
Welcome to Just a Minute. Thank you. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the minute waltz fades away, once more it is my pleasure to welcome the many listeners we have throughout the world, but also the 4 talented, extrovert, and brilliant players of the game who have assembled to perform in the show this week. They are Paul Merton, Graham Norton, Fred Macaulay, and Clement Freud, and will you please welcome all 4 of them? As usual, I'm going to ask them to speak on a subject that I will give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Beside me sits Jane Gibson, who's going to help me keep the score, and when the 60 seconds are up, she will blow, in magnificent fashion, a whistle. And this particular edition of Just a Minute is coming from the lovely, beautiful King's Theatre in the heart of the great city of Glasgow. And we're also part, by the way, of Music Live in Glasgow, which is lovely to be here for that. Paul Merton is going to begin the show this week, and the subject is Speakeasy. Paul, give us some thoughts on that subject. 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
A man goes up to an ice cream van and he says, "I'll have a double vanilla ice cream." And the owner says, "Do you want raspberry syrup with that?" He says, "Yes." "Crushed nuts?" "No, laryngitis." And then...
Oh, brilliant gag. A brilliant gag. It deserves the applause. But, Clement, why did you challenge?
He repeated ice cream, but I wanted to let him get
yes,
to the
did.
end of the
You know,
story.
he very sportingly let him repeat the words so he could get the gag out. Clement, you have a correct challenge. You get a point for a correct challenge, of course. There are 47 seconds available. The subject is Speakeasy, and you start now.
Speakeasies were bars in America during the Prohibition, and people found that if they drank enough alcohol, they got all the effects of drunkenness. It was hugely encouraging. It was called Speakeasy because you had to speak...
Fred Macaulay, you challenged.
Yes, there was a hesitation, I thought.
And your thoughts are correct. I agree with you. There are 29 seconds available. Fred, you have a correct challenge. You have a point for that, of course. Speakeasy is with you, starting now.
I think if they sold alcohol in these premises, then it was a misnomer, because speaking isn't very easy when you're drunk. Slurring is. It should have been called a slur easy, because that's much better when you've had a few drinks. You're gonna, if it was in Glasgow, it would be called a speak difficult, because you wouldn't be able to form a sentence, and you'd just stand there saying, "Oh, I'll have another pint because I've had a grand old time." You look at my pint there, pal.
Whoever is speaking as the whistle goes gains an extra point.
Only Scott here. I'm the one that's stereotyping us, and I do apologise for that.
Don't worry, I can do it as well. So,
That's a comfort.
Fred Macaulay, you were speaking as the whistle went. You gain an extra point for that. So you have got the lead at the end of the round. Graham Norton, will you take the next round? The subject is tying the knot. Will you tell us something about tying the knot in this game starting now?
People often ask me why the lovely, talented Liz Hurley is often surrounded by seamen. And I can tell you it's because they all share a deep interest in tying knots. Seamen, obviously, on their boats.
Paul Merton challenge.
An awful lot of seamen.
So, Paul, a correct challenge, repetition. 40 seconds are available for tying the knot with you, Paul Merton, starting now.
If you walk around the streets of Portsmouth, you'll find that they are full of discharged seamen because the Royal Navy lets people go from the ships. But tying the knot is a peculiarly vicious form of contraception. What you have to do is the fallopian tube is snipped and then tied at the end, and I'm not referring, of course, to the male organ here, but the tubes that I was referring to, of course, belong...
Clement Freud challenge.
2 of courses.
There were 2 of courses.
Was there really?
Yes. Children listen to this show, but I don't think they'll understand all that.
They will. We were chatting about sailors tying knots. Yeah.
I don't think many children know about fallopian tubes.
Oh, in fairness, I see what you mean.
Yes.
Though on some level, they have experience.
And if there are any children listening, if you ever are in Fallopia, I can recommend...
Right, who challenged? Clement Freud, you had a correct challenge. You've got 14 seconds. Tying the knot, starting now.
When I was in the Boy Scouts, tying the knot was considered hugely important. Reef knot, sheep bend, sheep shank.
Paul Merton.
There was a couple of sheep there.
No. One sheep shank is a one word.
Is it?
Yes.
I thought it's an illegal practice these days, isn't it? You can't do it on the Isle of Man, I know that.
I think it's a practice, but I don't know whether it's illegal. Clement, an incorrect challenge, so you have 5 seconds on tying the knot, starting now.
And you got a badge which was sewn onto the arm of your jacket, and you wore it proudly.
Clement Freud was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so, and he has taken the lead at the end of that round. And Clement, it's your turn to begin. The subject is the West Lothian question. That got an unexpected response. Well, they're obviously deeply involved in it up here, and there are 60 seconds as usual. Tell us something about it, starting now.
The West Lothian question was one put by Tam D.L., whose name is spelled D-A-L-Z-I-E, and then the third letter again. And I'm not going to bother you with it hugely at this moment, because there are so many West Lothian questions. Is there toasty still for tea in Octamukti? Is a West Lothian question which...
Fred Macaulay challenge.
Deviation, Octamukti is not in West Lothian.
If it were in West Lothian, people would know. It's because it's not in West Lothian that people want to know whether there are still toasties in Octamukti.
A very fine effort to justify Clement, but I disagree, so...
What do you mean you disagree?
Well, no, I think Fred's got a correct challenge, and I'm going to give him the subject.
You mean people in West Lothian can't ask about the provision of tea in Octamukti?
They can ask about it, but you conveyed that Octamukti was in West Lothian. And that's, to my mind, you did. 36 seconds. 36, that's right. 36. On the West Lothian question with you, Fred, starting now.
I'm going to...
Clement,
hesitation.
Hesitation. But, oh, yes, your light came on first, Paul. Right. Yes, it was a hesitation. The West Lothian question with you, Paul. 34 seconds, starting now.
I was watching a quiz show, and the contestant was coming up to the final round, and they were suddenly facing the West Lothian question. How many people in West Lothian are there who own their own cars? The person sat there for a moment and said, "Can I phone a friend?" And so they contacted a pal by telephone who happened to live in West Lothian, and they decided to tell them that the answer was 147. So the person who was in the television studio...
Paul Merton was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so. He's equal with Fred Macaulay in second place. Clement Freud is 1 point ahead in the lead. And Paul Merton, your turn to begin. Oh, I say, this is interesting. The life cycle of a mayfly. Will you tell us something about that particular subject? 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
8 o'clock in the morning, born. 9:15, puberty. 10:30, become a regular listener to Radio 4. is the average lifespan of the mayfly. It is a curious insect. It only has one day in which to spread its wings to find an appropriate sexual partner. Sometimes they find another mayfly. Sometimes it's a human being.
Graham Norton challenged.
Yeah, not of some... Is that bad
No,
sometimes?
he repeated sometimes, yes. And
it's quite a long word.
Long word?
Yeah.
It's a long word. He repeated, and we haven't heard from you for ages.
Hello.
Hello.
I was writing postcards, sorry.
Right. The life cycle of a mayfly is with you, Graham, and there are 36 seconds available starting now.
To call it a life cycle seems a tragic misnomer. The poor mayfly scarcely has time to mount a bike. Never mind learn how to ride it and go for a cycle through the countryside with a basket full of kittens and onions round its strange insect neck.
Yes?
Deviation. A mayfly doesn't have a neck.
What's this little insecty thing, charging a little insect head to its insect leg?
It doesn't ride a bicycle either.
It doesn't ride a bicycle.
Really? That's what I was saying. Why?
No, he was going
bicycle?
into a world of fantasy about the bicycle, but I agree. I mean, his head is attached to the body. You could say, there's a form of mayfly neck there.
I think so.
Yes, and I agree. So
the sadness is there will be letters.
Graham, I disagree with the challenge. So you get a point for that, and you keep the subject, the life cycle of a mayfly, 17 seconds starting now.
A mayfly spends its entire lifespan attending the funerals of relatives. This seems unfair. You get one day, and it's on the phone for flowers. Where do we go afterwards? Is it tea, coffee, sandwiches? I don't know.
So Graham Norton got points in that round, including one for speaking as the whistle went. And Graham Norton, it's your turn to begin. The subject, the shortest night. Tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now.
The shortest night I ever spent was in Bandon County, Cork, where I was heading out on my bike. And I was adjusting the saddle. But what they didn't tell you was that if you did that to the thing you sit on, it broke the brake cable. Poor design, I feel.
Fred Macaulay challenge.
I think A is a hesitation.
You said Yes, that's fine.
It's a technical term for bike cable.
Fred, I agree with the challenge. 39 seconds for you. The shortest night starting now.
Contrary to popular belief, the shortest night doesn't happen in June. It usually occurs.
Clement Freud challenge. Yes?
Hesitation.
I think, actually, that he rather cleverly got away from happens, and he rather elongated occurs into a strange-sounding word, but he didn't actually hesitate, to my mind, so I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Your equally divided decision amongst the audience. You will notice that I always redress the balance in fairness if there's another opportunity later. So you have the benefit of the doubt, Fred. 35 seconds available, the shortest night starting now. And Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation.
No. You have another point, Fred Macaulay, and you have 34 seconds starting now.
And...
Yes.
Deviation.
Why?
He didn't hesitate.
Give Clement a bonus point because we enjoyed the challenge, but Fred, you've still got the subject and a point for being interrupted. You have 32 and a half seconds starting now.
It happened in November when I was in Dublin and I had 50 minutes sleep, which must be the shortest night I've ever had. I was out having a dark substance that appeared in a glass and it was liquid with a white top. I think they call it stout because that's what it makes you after you've had 8 pints, and I woke up 50...
Clement challenge.
Was that hesitation?
Yes, it was hesitation. Clement, a correct challenge. It was hesitation on that occasion. And you have 11 seconds, the shortest night starting now.
When Her Majesty conferred a knighthood on Gordon Richards, the jockey, he became without much doubt the shortest night of the year.
Well, I'm glad you got that comment in, Clement, because it was well worth the applause. And you also spoke as a whistle when you gained that extra point, and you have increased your lead at the end of the round, and it's also your turn to take the next round. The subject is bangers and mash. Tell us something about that exotic subject in just a minute, starting now.
I think the Trade Description Act would be...
Fred Macaulay challenge.
I just wanted to make an incorrect challenge to give Clement a point.
To redress the balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Clement, you have a bonus point from Fred Macaulay.
Bonus point.
What's that?
I don't have a bonus point.
Yes, you do.
I have a point for a wrong challenge.
And you have 57 seconds to continue on bangers and mash, starting now. And Paul Merton challenged.
Sudden death.
That was hesitation. 55 seconds available. Bangers and mash with you, Paul, starting now.
To my mind, it's the most wonderful meal ever created. I remember when I was about 7 years old, my mother used to make bangers and mash, and particularly with gravy. I don't think there's anything like it. There was a shop in London that specialises in selling all kinds of different bangers made of lamb, nuts in May. All kinds of different recipes are used.
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of different.
There was a lot of different there.
Was there a lot of different?
36 seconds, Clement. Another correct challenge. Bangers and mash is back with you, starting now.
Bangers are called bangers because they have skin which under heat explodes, causing a bang. Mash.
Graham Norton challenge.
Not in my kitchen. That doesn't happen, does it?
Well, it
When
does.
have you heard your sausages exploding?
Yes. If you
I'd
put
cook them more often if they did that.
If you put them on too strong a heat and cook them too quickly, they will explode. They will burst open, and they're delicious then. Clement, you have 29 seconds still available on bangers and mash, starting now.
Mash is called mash because you get potatoes and mash them. Normally, having previously boiled them with salt in water, you get a fork and wield it until the tubers are entirely pureed. A very good word, I think, for mash. Now, currently, mash is incredibly popular in restaurants because people know that it's fattening, that it's bad for them. You can have rosemary or thyme.
So Clement Freud kept going to the whistle when gained that extra point, and with other points in the round, he's got quite a strong lead now. But Fred Macaulay, it's your turn to begin. The subject is this. What I'd be doing if I wasn't doing this. It's an interesting subject. Can you talk on it in this game, starting now?
Well, given that this is a recording, then what I'm doing when I'm not doing this, you can phone me up and ask me. And if it's the 12 o'clock recording that you're listening to, then I'm digging the garden. If it's the Sunday repeat, I'm lying down, not through having a hangover. It's because I hurt myself gardening.
Full challenge.
Too gardening.
Yes, you're doing too much gardening, I'm afraid. What I'd be doing if I wasn't doing this, Paul, that's the subject. It's with you, 41 seconds, starting now.
I'd be hitting the night spots of Glasgow with Nicholas Parsons. We'd pick up a couple of prostitutes, get some bottles of whiskey, and really show Glasgow how to enjoy itself. We'd be painting it red. We'd be saying to Brandy and Delilah...
The challenge. They love the idea of that dissipated image you created, but Clement had a correct challenge of hesitation. And
no, I didn't.
What was your...
Repetition of Glasgow.
Oh, that's right. You can have repetition of Glasgow as well if you want, but it was...
Okay, hesitation then.
No, go with repetition. Please yourself.
No, because I think her name actually is Delilah.
Yeah. She's got a speech impediment that makes her 15 quid cheaper. I said to her once, I said, why, Delilah?
Was that the night you saw the light in her window?
Well, that's one way of putting it.
27 seconds. It's with you, Clement, on what I'd be doing if I wasn't doing this, starting now.
If I wasn't doing this, I would go into a telephone booth and ring West Lothian and ask whether they still serve toasties in Octomukti.
Oh, challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, it was. He got it off his chest, and that was enough.
So, Paul, you have a correct challenge of hesitation. 14 seconds left. What I'd be doing if I wasn't doing this starting now?
Rather like Fred, when the show goes out, I will be sitting back, perhaps with a cup of tea in my hand, listening to the wonderful, witty repartee that passes for light entertainment in this farrago of a show. It is a wonderful pleasure.
Paul Merton kept going to the whistle when gained that extra point. He's creeping up on our leader, Clement Freud, but he's ahead of Graham Norton and Fred Macaulay. And Paul Merton, it's your turn to begin. The subject is chancing my arm. Tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now.
One night, when I was in the middle of the woods, a mischievous pixie appeared from around a tree trunk and asked me to dive into the flame of eternal youth. And I thought, hello. So what I did was, rather than risk my entire body, I chanced my arm into the fire. That is why this particular limb here is 15 years younger than the rest of me. And sometimes when I get lonely, it comes in very handy, because I can pick up the phone and dial my friends on that particular instrument, the telephone, and speak to them, where they are, whether in West Lothian or Octomukty, it doesn't matter. I can contact them telephonically and say, how are you? What's life like where you are? And they say, things are good, not too bad, thank you very much. One particular pal of mine, he was somebody who liked a bit of a gamble, and 1 year during the Grand National, he decided to bet on the fact that there would be a false start. Unfortunately, it wasn't in the year where there was a beginning that wasn't what it should have been. He had gambled on the...
Wow. A well-deserved round of applause, because it's a tough game, and to do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviation for 1 full minute and not be interrupted. He gets a point, of course, for speaking the whistle end, and a bonus point for not being interrupted. And Paul Merton, you have crept forward, but you're still just trailing our leader, Clement Freud. Clement Freud, it's your turn to begin. The subject is penny pinching. Tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now.
Penny pinching is an expression for mean, miserly, tight-fisted, parsimonious, or parsimonious, as some people pronounce it. There is...
Graham Norton challenge.
I thought he hesitated.
He did hesitate, yes, Graham. So you've got in with 47 seconds on penny pinching, starting now.
In Kansas, there is a Glasgow, much smaller than this lovely city, and yet it is quite quiet, but it gets very busy once a year, when rather like...
Paul Merton challenge.
We haven't established penny pinching yet.
No.
I see.
Yes, but you do have to, in just a minute, considering we've only got 60 seconds, get into the subject much more rapidly than that.
All
Otherwise,
right.
we're accused of...
Shall I do that, then?
No, you can't.
Curses.
A good try. No, I think that's deviation, because you had been going for quite a few seconds. Penny pinching's with you, Paul. 33 seconds starting now.
There used to be a game that you would see at the fun fair where you drop a penny through the slot onto this moving table effect thing, and the idea was to knock further coins off this ledge onto some other coins beneath it.
Clement Freud challenge.
Coins.
There were more coins than there should have been there. So 19 seconds is with you, penny pinching, Clement, starting now.
There are some who talk of having not 2 pennies to rub together, and it is the most extraordinary thing if...
Paul Merton challenge.
Isn't it 2 halfpennies to rub together?
Yes, it is. It's 2 halfpence.
I said there are some who talk of not having 2 pennies to rub together.
Well, those people are guilty of deviation.
Yes.
And if they were here, I would tell them.
And you have told us and got a point for it, and the subject as well of 12 seconds, penny pinching, starting now.
I remember one night up here in Glasgow with Nicholas Parsons where Delilah was busy and Penny came out to see us, and she was an absolutely beautiful-looking woman. I remember our chairman saying...
oh, dear. Yes, Clement, you've challenged.
Repetitions, remember.
Yes, you did remember too much. I wish I could remember Penny as well as you did.
She sends her regards.
Just,
She said you left your teeth behind last time.
Clement, back to just a minute. You got in with 1 second to go on penny pinching, starting now. And you've challenged.
Hesitation.
I'd love to give it to you, but actually, no, he didn't hesitate. You've got 3/4 of a second on penny pinching. Clement, starting now.
Penny pinch.
And...
Repetition.
Of what?
The same vowel sound as the one before.
What do I do? I know, give 2 bonus points to Paul because he'll enjoy both challenges, but they weren't correct. Clement's got 2 points, get another point now, and he has penny pinching, half a second to go, starting now. Well, a lot of points are scored in that round, including one for speaking by the whistle was supposed to have gone with Clement Freud. He's still in the lead, just ahead of Paul Merton, and then comes Fred Macaulay and Graham Norton in that order, and we are now moving into the last round. It's very apt that Fred Macaulay should take the last round. It's your turn, so Fred. And what a lovely Scottish subject we've got for you. A wee dock and Doris. I'm sure they all know what it is out there, but will you try and elucidate on that subject starting now?
It is very appropriate that we finish with a wee Doc and Doris, because shortly we will all ging awa, which is the next line of that particular song. I didn't know if a wee Doc and Doris was indeed a drink and a chat, which is what I think it is. I used to think dockin was indeed an adjective. And you could say, what... do let me finish, it's very funny.
No, it wasn't. It was Paul challenge first. It was hesitation, yes. Yeah. So, Paul, can you try to tell us something about a wee Doc and Doris? And 40 seconds starting now.
I remember me and Nicholas taking Doris round his very small dockyard. And what a wonderful time we had. The smell of Swarthega was still in the air. Wonderful perfume. She was the cheapest she could get. And I was wearing an aftershave called Midnight in Dockland. A wonderful perfume.
Fred Macaulay challenge.
2 wonderfuls.
Yes.
3 wonderfuls. My apologies.
3 wonderful. It doesn't matter.
Repetition of wonderful then.
Yes.
Twice.
And it was. But you only get 1 point for it, Fred. And 24 seconds. You take back the subject of a wee Doc and Doris, starting now.
So you could say to the audience here, what did you do last night? And they may reply, I had a dockin' good time down at the King's Theatre. Challenge for not being very funny.
He stopped. So that is hesitation. He did stop 16 seconds. Yes, a wee Doc and Doris is with you now, Clement, starting now.
It scans with boiled beef and carrots. Wee Doc and Doris.
Graham Norton challenge.
I just had to stop it. It's a theatre, Clement. You can't just sing wherever you want.
What about hesitation?
Oh, and hesitation.
Yes, right, yes. So let's hear now from Graham Norton for the last 10 seconds. A wee Doc and Doris, starting now.
My mother has a picture on the wall of a wee Doc and Doris. It looks rather like a small doctor and an old drag queen called Doris. I don't know what
So Graham Norton brought that round to a close. He also has brought the show to a close in great style. And alas, in spite of his great contribution, he finished in 4th place. Just behind Fred Macaulay, who had a magnificent contribution, who was just behind Paul Merton, who had a great contribution, who was just behind Clement Freud, who had a magnificent contribution.
How come everybody else was magnificent and I was great?
Because I was trying to think of a different adjective and not be repetitious. But now let's have a big round of applause for the winner this week, Clement Freud. And it only remains for me to say thank you to these 4 fine exponents of this difficult game, and they are Paul Merton, Graham Norton, Fred Macaulay, and Clement Freud. We also thank Jane Gibson, who's been sitting beside me and blowing her whistle with great style this week and also helping with the score. We thank Ian Messiter, who created the game, and our producer and director, who is Chris Neal. And I also want to thank, on behalf of all of us, this delightful, warm, enthusiastic, responsive, cultured audience here sitting in the King's Theatre in Glasgow. From me, Nicholas Parsons, goodbye.